is Rabbi Tzvi Elimelech Shapira of Dinov, who is actually a nephew of Elimelech of Lizhansk, the Rabbi Elimelech. And his book, which I mentioned once before, his Bnei Yisachar, is considered a classic on the holidays, a Hasidic classic on the holidays. And if we have time, I would like to try to discuss two things that he does. The first thing, I call it the way he does because he has a certain format of how he discusses the months of the year. Now, of course, he starts with Nisan, which is our month, which is the first month according to the Torah. Remember, that our year starts with Tishrei when we count the years, but the months we count from Nisan. And actually, Nisan is, hello, Pamela. Now, Nisan is the beginning of the agricultural year, because Nisan, being the spring, is the time that you plant. And so, therefore, Pesach is called Chag HaAviv, just like Nisan is Chodesh HaAviv. And Shavuot, after 49 days from the second day of Pesach, is called the festival of the Katsir of the harvest. And Sukkot is called the festival of ingathering of the crops, or Chag HaAsif. So really the agricultural year in Israel is 6 months. It starts from Pesach and it ends with Sukkot. It's even slightly, more or less 6 months. And that's why Sukkot in the Torah is called Litkufat Hashana, which means in the end of that period of the year. It's really the end. Not only is Tishrei the beginning of a year in a sense, but it's also the end of the agricultural year with the ingathering of the crops. Therefore, Pesach, Shavuot, Sukkot are not just an arbitrary list of holidays that work in that progression. They're actually the progression of the agricultural year. And of course, for every holiday, there's also a meaning within for the Jewish people. So Pesach is the Aviv, it's the spring and the time of the planting, and it's also the beginning of the renaissance of life, and it's the birth of the Jewish people from Egypt. We went into Egypt 70 individuals. You might say we were a large clan or a tribe, and we came out a people, a nation. Then Shavuot is receiving, well, Shavuot is first of all Katsir, where we harvest the crops, and as if God harvested his Torah and gave it to us. It's also, if you look at it in a sense of maturation, of growing up, so if Pesach is the birth, so Shavuot is like the time that you reach maturity, manhood, like getting bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah for a woman, and you get the Aliyah Torah, because you have your formal logic. And before that, you could speak, but you weren't that smart. That's like Sfirat Omer. Every day between Pesach and Shavuot, we talk just like a child learns to talk from the age of 2. But until they have something to say, they have to pass 11 or 12 to be able to have really something to say. And then, of course, Sukkot, which represents the house, right? A person builds a family in a house, so you have this progression also as far as the individual and the Jewish people, of course, too. The house represents the Beit HaMikdash, Sukkot David HaNofelet, the Sukkah of David, the fallen Sukkah of David, and this also becomes something of significance for us. It's also the ingathering of the crops, is like the ingathering of the exiles for Pesach. So, the unique thing about Bnei Yisachar, Rabbi Tzvi Elimelech, is his use of Sefer Yetzirah, the book of formation, at the beginning of each month. Just to understand a little bit of something in the Sefer Yetzirah, Sefer Yetzirah is sort of like a mystical way of looking at nature. And it looks for formulations and models within nature that have symbolic significance. So, for instance, Sefer Yetzirah says that all of nature is based on the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. You have the first letters Aleph, Mem, Shin, the letters Emesh, and they represent the 3 Yesodot, which are the 3 elements, and the 3 elements are Eish, fire, that's Aleph, Maim, water, and Shin, Avir. Aleph is Avir, Maim, Eish. Aleph is Avir, Mem is Maim, Shin is Eish. Okay? That's a discussion by itself, but that's the way it's at least written in Sefer Yetzirah. And there is no fourth element. There is no ground, no earth. There's only three elements. For Sefer Yetzirah, we're on the ground, so therefore the three elements are what encircle us. Now, in Sefer Yetzirah, the three elements also represent the three seasons that we experience here in Israel. Because Avir, you have it really, water is winter because it rains in the winter, and this winter it rained a lot. The Kinneret goes all the way up. Somebody said to me, what's the point? We have the Kinneret all the way up, which is a blessing, but we're going through a horrific pandemic. And I said that's because the Kinneret is preparing itself for the world after. Because after this, we're hoping for blessing and a renewed possibility on life. So the Kinneret has been reminding us of that for a few months now. So so water represents the winter. Fire, of course, represents the summer. As we know, the summers can be, especially in some places in Israel, very hot. In the Beit Shan Valley, in Eilat, in the Jordan Valley, can easily go up to 40 degrees Celsius. That's Aish. And then Avir, which means air, is the in-between. It's the go-betweens, which is from summer to spring. Well, excuse me, spring is from summer to winter, and spring is from winter to summer, and fall is from summer to winter. So it's the ma'avarim, it's the passing from one to another, because in Israel they're sort of similar. Spring and fall are similar concepts, and it's very hard to put your finger on them, really, because we don't really have four seasons here. If you go to Europe or North America, certain places in North America, so you'll find that you have the leaves change in the autumn, and in the spring, and then the leaves fall off in the winter, and they start growing again in the summer. You can actually visually see four seasons, which is very hard to see in Israel. It's more or less the rainy season, the hot season, and what goes between. And therefore, Sefer Yetzirah, which is written in the land of Israel, just connotes them avir, which is a dublatan, really, in the writings of the Second Temple period, because avir both means air, but it also means partitions, avirim. So it's like a partition between summer and winter and summer. There's a lot to say about Sefer Yetzirah, but I want to get to Tzvi Elimelech of Dinov. So you have the three seasons, which, as I said, are water, fire, and air. Those are the three letters Emesh. Then you have the seven letters Beged Kefet. Actually, according to Sefer Yetzirah, Beged Kafrat. The seven letters which receive a dagesh, which receive a dot, which makes them more emphasized. When a veit has a dot, it becomes a bait. When a fei has a dot, it becomes a pay. Okay, so and we have a klal in Hebrew grammar. There's a rule: beged kefet barosh bila. When these letters come at the beginning of a word, they get a dagesh, they get an emphasis. And so Sefer Yetzirah throws in also the resh into this. So these seven letters represent the 7 days of the week. Then you have 12 letters left, which are called the Otiot Pshutot, the simple letters. And these 12 letters now become the 12 months of the year. Because of that, every letter becomes another month. And in Sefer Yetzirah, the letter which matches the month of Nisan is the Hey. The letter Hey is the one which matches the month of Nisan. So as he starts every month, he quotes from Sefer Yetzirah, and I will read it to you. You can find this in Bnei Yisachar on page 32. So, he says, B'Sefer Yetzirah, Himlich ot hey b'sicha. So, there's a lot that needs to be explained. I'll try to do it briefly. So, the letter Hey is now the king of Nisan. And it's related to speech. This is another thing. The book of Yetzirah splits the human body into 12 parts. And one of the 12 parts is called speech. But it doesn't call it mouth, it calls it speech. Because the mouth has different things. And here we're talking about speech. There's also the right arm and the left arm and the right leg and the left leg. So you have this concept of speech. So let me just read the whole thing. Okay, you have the letter Hey. So he made the letter Hey king in sicha, in speech, and he gave it a crown and connected them, and he inscribed within them Taleh Ba'olam, which means the month of, which means Leo, not Leo, the Taleh, the month of Nisan, which is, I guess, which is until April 21st in the astrological chart, is the, I forget how you call it in English, it's the sheep, the goat. So is it, so right before Taurus, you have, I'm not that much into astrology, but it's the one before Taurus. Okay, it's the Taleh in Hebrew, which is for the month of Nisan. In other words, the astrological chart also matches these letters for the month of the year, which is the Hey. And it's called Nisan in the, of course, in the world, and it's called the right leg in the soul. So you have a couple of things here. You have different ways of breaking things down. Basically, you see, aside from the right leg, which is in the soul, which means the living body, you also have different things that are in charge of different parts of the body. Okay, so that's, you have sicha on the one hand, which is speech, but you also have the right leg. Anyhow, the what we have here are symbols that are matched up with the month of Nisan according to the book of Yetzirah. And so what Tzvi Elimelech is going to do is going to try to explain why these symbols are specifically matched up to the month of Nisan. Again, it was the letter Hey of the 12 letters that represents the months. It was Sicha, which are things that have to do with human expression. It was the Taleh, the astrological sign for the month of April until the 21st of April, which is called Taleh, which is, if somebody knows what it's called in English, if you can remind me, right? It's the Taleh is really, it's like a goat, and Nisan in the year, meaning the names of the months, and it's also the right leg in the nefesh. And here nefesh in Sefer Yetzirah, like in the Bible, means the living body, and the living body is the right leg. Okay, so since it's the first time he's quoting, because Nisan is the first month, he says, this is our nusach, this is the way it is in our version in the book of Yetzirah, even though there are earlier versions. It says, Yesh lehitbonen, let's meditate on the meaning of this. B'chol hasharim apula shayechad ha'eva lamashal chodesh Adar. Says, now normally in the book of Yetzirah, when they seem to connect something to a month, the connection sometimes seems obvious. Like, for instance, Adar is called the month of laughter. So the expression of Adar, Nisan, we said the expression is speech, and the expression of Adar is laughter. Well, that makes sense because Purim is a holiday of joy and laughter. And also the part of the body which represents Adar is the Tchol, which is the spleen, and our rabbis have said in the Talmud that the spleen is connected to laughter, so that makes a lot of sense. But he says, when we talk about the month of Nisan, how does the expression of speech connect with the right leg in the body? And in general, what exactly is this connection to the idea of speech with the month of Nisan? And how does it connect to the mazal of Taleh, to the astrological sign of Taleh, the gedi, the goat? So he says, "Bereishit omar lecha, hachodesh hazehu melech hachodeshim." First of all, Nisan, of course, is called the king of all the months, because it says in the Torah, in Shmot chapter 12, Rosh Rishonu lechodshei Hashana. right? It's the beginning of the months of the year. It also says in the Talmud in Rosh Hashanah that it's Rosh Hashanah leMelachim, that it's the beginning of the years according to the way the kings count. Remember, chronologically, in the ancient days, the counting of the years was to the various kings that used to be at the time. And since the month of Nisan is the first month for the counting of the kings, therefore, since the king of Israel has to come from Judah, it must be a month which is related to Judah. Now, since the king commands orders, and that's the way the people really know what the king wants, so then the king represents speech. The king is called in Hebrew the dabar. Dabar, or the speaker, also represents the leader, the authority. Bidvar melech shulton, what the oration of the king represents his majesty and his government. So the king makes commands and speeches and interpretations, and that's how the people know what the king wants. So that's the relationship between Judah, the first month, the month that the kings count by, and also the concept of speech. If you remember, there was once a movie called The King's Speech. So here we're talking about the King's Speech. And v'titbonen midat malchut bizman hagalut ne'emar ne'elamti dumiyah. And we know also that speech is called, or the mouth in Kabbalistic symbolism is called the lowest rung of the Sefirot, of the 10 emanations, which is the Malchut. And it says that during the exile, speech goes into exile too, because there is no utterance of the king, etc. And the same thing happened in Egypt in the time of the Galut, the exile and the enslavement, meaning speech was lost. The Zohar says that speech was in the Galut, speech was in exile. Why was speech in exile? I explained this, I think, before, because speech represents identity and expression. Slaves have neither identity nor the ability to express themselves. And that's called the Jewish people having speech in exile when they were enslaved in Egypt. So, B'diburze, and this speech is what the Ari, Isaac Luria, meant in his Kavanot, when he said that Pesach is Pesach. We mentioned this in the past also by the Sfat Emet. The word Pesach can be broken up into two words, which is Peh, the mouth, and Sach, which means to speak. So, again, we have this relationship to speech in the month of Nisan. Now, this is also called a Chodesh Hazeh. It says that this month, which is the month of kings, this is the month of expression of speech according to the book of Yetzirah. And it's also the expression of the kingship, which is the lowest rung of the Sefirot, which of course represents Judah, the king. Now, it's also the Gedi, it's also the goat in the astrological chart, because the goat is what we bring, meaning the sheep, is what we bring for the Korban Pesach, for the Paschal offering. So, according to this, you have Pesach. So when you write Pesach, it should be Pei and then Samachet, which means the mouth is speaking. But if you say that Pesach represents two words, which is Pesach, you're missing the Hey. So he says the Hey that's missing represents speech. And it's missing because in Egypt, speech was in exile. And that's why it was missing and not written down. Because it represents the last Hey of God's name, which represents against the last Sphira, which is called Malchut, which is called in the Zohar Malchut Peh, Torah Shabal Peh, in the special prayer of Eliyahu Navi. So it says Malchut, the lowest rung of the emanations, is called the mouth. And it's also the oral tradition, which is the Torah, which is spoken orally through the mouth. That's why the hey here is not written in the word Pesach. It's only given to us orally, like the oral tradition. And that's why it says that the letter hey represents this month, because this is the secret of the Malchut, of God's kingdom, which is the lowest rung of the Sefirot. Now, why does it say in the book of Yetzirah that Pesach represents the right leg? What does the right leg have to do with speech? What does it have to do with the sheep? What does it have to do with the month of Nisan? What does it have to do with Judah? So he says it does have to do with Pesach, because what happened on Pesach? On Pesach, it says that God passed over the houses of the Israelites in Egypt during Makat Bechorot, on the slaying of the firstborn, and slayed the firstborn of the Egyptians, but passed over the Israelite houses. So, what does that mean? It says in Shir Hashirim, Medaleg al he'arim mekapetz al hagavot, that as if God jumps from mountain to mountain and on the hills. And lig'ol tashchina, and why does he jump from mountain to mountain? To redeem the divine presence, the Shekhinah, and the children, which is, of course, the Jewish people. So, therefore, we have to eat the matzah very quickly, because it's called jumping, something very quick. And it's also called Pesach. Why? Because when you jump, Pesach is to jump over one house and go to the other one. And when you jump with your strong leg, which is your right leg. And therefore, the book of Yetzirah calls Nisan the right leg in the body, because God jumped over the houses of the Israelites and smote the firstborn of the Egyptians. So, and then he goes into another Kabbalistic thing, which I'll just jump over. Therefore, we have the Taleh, the astrological sign of this month, which is the sheep, which represents the Korban Pesach. It's the letter Hey, which is missing from the word Pesach. It's the Sicha, the expression of speech, which is the Pesach, the mouth that speaks. It's also the beginning of the months, which Nisan, according to the Mishnah, is the way that you count for the kings, and therefore represents Judah, who is of course, represents the kings of Israel. And yes, so now I'll continue. And the right leg. Kafia Masora. Now, according to our tradition, Pesach b'tosefet hey nirmaz himlich ot hey b'sicha v'tatavin baruch hamafli plaot hayotzer kol hu Elokeinu magid merishit acharit ot hey b'sicha himlich ot hey achrona kashim sheromez lamalchut peh shaya emo banim shebichinat shechina shochenet imanu begalutenu רק שבגלות הוא כביכול סתימת הפה, כרחל לפני גוזזים, וצר בו מבראשית תלה בעולם ניסן בשנה. I'm just reading through for a moment. רגלים מנפש, זכר ונקבה, הכל כמשל, ובזה תבין מה שקראו בניסן ראש השנה למלכים לרגלים. Now you can understand, he says, why in the Mishnah it says that Nisan, in the Mishnah and Rosh Hashanah, because it says that there are 4 beginnings of the year. Nisan, it says the Rosh Hashanah for the kings and for the festivals. The festivals in Hebrew is called Regalim, which literally means legs, because it's the pilgrim holidays. So, and the Gemara says, why do you say the Regalim starts in Nisan? It's really on the 15th. It's with Passover. And they said, well, it's Regal Shabor Rosh Hashanah Regalim. It's the month where you have the first holiday of the 3 pilgrim holidays. And therefore it represents, of course, the right leg, this idea of the holidays, meaning the stronger leg. Let me just go through this quickly. See if there's something else to add. Okay, so this was the first idea I wanted to go to. I'm going to leave him at this point and just try to go over and understand what we were able to derive from this idea. Again, he's using the book of Yetzirah. In the symbolism of the book of Yetzirah, every month, again, has a letter. The month of Nisan is the letter Hey. An expression The month of Nisan is the expression of speech, a part of the body, which is the right leg, an astrological sign, which here is Taleh, the sheep, and of course the name of the month, which is Nisan. He'll also say that Nisan is like the Hebrew word nes because of the miracles that happened to us during this holiday. So what he does then, he tries to connect these expressions for the month of Nisan to what actually happened in the history, which the book of Yetzirah actually doesn't do. It just presents to us what the things that are represented are symbolic to Nisan, and we sort of have to break our heads. So he does it for us month after month. So again, so Hey represents, so first you have the idea of expression. By the way, the letter Hey, which is 5, also represents in the Hebrew language the 22 letters can be broken down into what's called Hey Motzaot HaPeh, which are the 5 places within the mouth which you actually, speech formulates the letters. So you have what's called the letters of the throat, that's hemotzot the letters of the throat, which are called achra, right? The chet and the ayin and the aleph, and the hey. So they're letters of the throat. You have the letters of the tongue, which are diletant within the Hebrew language, the ones that roll off the tip of your tongue, diletant. Then you have the letters of the teeth, which are called zasrach, the letters of the teeth. Then you have the letters of the lips, which are bumaf, peit vav mem pe, bumaf. So you have 5 exits or ways of expressing letters in the Hebrew language, and they're called hemotzot peh. And also, the 5th one is the palate, which is gichak, where you have to touch your palate in order to express these words. Again, it's the throat, it's the tongue, it's the teeth, it's the lips, and it's the palate. So when you say those letters, you have to use different parts of your mouth and throat in order to express these letters. So they're called Hey Motzot Peh. So it also represents this idea of Hey. By the way, this idea of Hey is used by a lot of Hasidic interpreters and Kabbalistic interpreters on the Haggadah, because the Haggadah also starts Ha Lachma'anya, which they slightly changed to Hey Lachma'anya. Hey Lachma'anya. And also, if you remember, speech is very powerful. So Hey then represents the idea of speech from the 5 parts of the mouth, and it's also speech itself. It's speech for a number of reasons. First of all, this month is speech, as I said, Sicha. Also, in Kabbalistic ideas, the last Hey of the name of God represents the Malchut, which is also symbolized by the mouth, Malchut Peh. As I said, it says in the what's called the Tfilah Eliyahu in the Zohar, and also you have what's called Patach Eliyahu. Then you have also within you have the whole Haggadah, of course, is speech. The Torah says it's a mitzvah. You shall tell your child on this evening. And then the child has to ask. So you have the 4 sons who ask 4 different questions, except for the one who can't. And then you have the Manishtana, which is also 4 questions. So there's a lot of speaking, really, in different ways, and questions and speech connected to the night of Passover. So, and then of course the word Pesach, which the Ari and also the Shalah breaks down into 2 words, Pesach, the mouth, which talks, the idea of expression, and the idea that the Zohar said that slaves lack expression, lack speech. When the Jews exodus from Egypt, they reacquire the power of speech, which is this Sicha and the letter Hey together. Then he says, why in the book of Yetzirah do they say it's related in the body to regel yamin, the right foot? For 2 reasons. Number one, it's called Pesach when God jumps over the house of the Israelites. So you jump using 1 foot, and then you land with another one. And so that's the idea of regel yamin, the stronger foot. And then he says also that the Pesach is the first of Shalosh Regalim, of the 3 pilgrim holidays, which in Hebrew are called Regalim, which means feet. So in that sense also, and the strong foot would be the first one, because Pesach is the first one. So he's tying in then all these concepts that have to do with the holiday. Now, there's one other thing I thought of maybe reading to you, but I am deliberating unless I can shorten it because I don't want this to go, even though we started a bit late. Okay, I'll get into the main idea here and show you how he uses a lot of symbolism. He says in the name of the Shalah. In general, in Hasidic circles, Rabbi Shai Horovitz, who actually lives in Prague at the time of Isaac Luria, and he actually mentions Isaac Luria, even though he was not that familiar with his writings, because the writings of Isaac Luria did not actually reach Prague in the 16th century. They did reach Italy, but not Czechoslovakia, or whatever it might have been called at the time. So he says in the name of the Shalah, the three mitzvahs of the night of Passover, which is called Pesach Matzah Maror. If you remember, Rabbi Gamliel says, whoever did not say these three things was not Yotze, was not exempt of the obligation of the Haggadah. You have to say Pesach Matzah Maror, the Paschal offering, the matzah, and the bitter herbs. He says this represents the three patriarchs, Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Abraham is represented, he says, by the matzah, because the matzah has to be shamur, like we say matzah shmura. It has to be guarded, not to touch water. Matzah shmura means it was guarded even from the time of the harvest. If it's not shmura, then it's guarded from the time that it is flour. So matzah needs shimur, needs to be guarded. And about Avraham, it says, Vayishmor mishmarti, he guarded my precepts, he kept my precepts. Pesach represents Isaac, because Pesach, Isaac, if you remember, asked for Shnei Gedai Zim. He asked his son to bring him something to eat, and before he blesses him. And of course, both Esav goes to get a gedi, a young goat, and actually so does Yaakov when his mother tells him to do that, and she even gives him goat skins to put on his arms so that he will appear hairy. So this Shnei Gedayim Izim is Pesach, because why two of them? One for Pesach and one for Chagiga. It represents the two offerings, the Paschal offering and the festival offering. The Maror represents Jacob, because Jacob had a very difficult life, probably the most difficult of the patriarchs. They switched his wife, they didn't pay him on time with Laban, his brother wanted to kill him. He represents the Maror. And the Maror, of course, he says is chasa in Hebrew, which is lettuce, and chasa is like the Hebrew word lachus, which means to have compassion, because God has compassion on us and redeems us during this time. So then he says, he goes on to say a few other things, and let's see if I'll have to read it quickly, because sometimes, I sort of miss this. So V'nei midat Avraham chesed. The attribute of Abraham is called loving kindness. The attribute of Jacob is called compassion. And the attribute of Isaac is called judgment. Now, we have a mitzvah to eat the Pesach, the matzah maror, all together, which is called the korech. However, the Ramban Nachmanides says that if you don't have the Paschal offering, like today, where we don't do it in the temple, you can still do the korech just with the matzah and the maror, meaning just with the attribute of Abraham, which is kindness, and the attribute of Jacob, which is compassion. And Isaac, which represents the Paschal offering, you can do, which is also the judgment, you can do without it. But Ledat Haravid, according to Avraham ben David of Poskir, since you need at least three, you would have to put them all three together. Therefore, you need the Paschal offering to be part of the Korech also. But he says, if you only have loving kindness and compassion, it's also good. But even according to the opinion, when you need all three, if you have loving kindness, compassion, and also judgment becomes overruled by loving kindness and compassion. So he says, he takes the korech very seriously. What does the korech mean? We're throwing the three attributes together, which in Kabbalistic lingo is chesed, din, v'rachamim, which means loving kindness, judgment, and compassion. The korech, and each one, loving kindness, as he said before, represents the Pesach, right? Avraham, no, excuse me, was the matzah, which was Avraham. Yitzchak, din, was the Pesach, and Yaakov was the maror. Says, so when you eat the maror together with the matzah, it's loving kindness together with compassion, which is Abraham and Jacob's attribute that they represent. When you add the Paschal offering, remember the Paschal offering is killing an animal, so it's called judgment. It's also called fear, by the way, in Hasidic writing. So normally then, it's not so terrible to put fear and judgment on the side. We'd rather just have loving kindness and compassion. But according to the ones who say you need all three, because you officially do need the Paschal offering, and you do need the matzah and the maror, all three together, what does that mean? It means that in life, there is fear. There are difficulties, which is called stern judgment. But there's also love and kindness. And there's also compassion. And if you're able to focus on the love, the kindness, and the compassion, they will override the fear and the vicissitudes. Because in the end, there's a story of a chassid who went to the Rebbe and says, Rebbe, the world is so terrible. And and people are so evil. So the Rebbe says to him, first of all, the world is not that terrible, and you're not so righteous either. So, in other words, everything has to be looking in the global picture, in the larger picture. There is love in the world, there is fear and difficulties in the world, and there is compassion in the world. And the reason why out of these three, two of them seem to be more compassionate than the other third is because in a sense that's the way it is. If you notice in Kabbalistic lingo, the right arm is love, the left arm is fear, because love will always overcome fear. Can you imagine if you're walking by a house and you see it on fire and you say, oh my goodness, it's on fire, are there people in there? The fireman says, unfortunately there is, there's a young boy. Really? I live in this neighborhood. What's his name? He says the name, and he realizes it's his son. He says, forget it, I'm going in. Okay? Love can always conquer fear. That's just the way life is. So if we focus on love and not fear, if we focus on compassion and not the vicissitudes, then we are able to transform even the most difficult of situation and focus what is going to happen after. And the difficulties that we are going through now too. We're going through difficult times. We have to focus on the day after and the rebuilding and how we're going to prepare ourselves for this rebuilding when the time comes. So I wish everybody Mo'adim L'Simcha, and I'm sorry that we started about 10 minutes late. Early wouldn't have been so difficult, but 10 minutes late, but I had some problems here with the setup in the new model. Toda Rabba, Shalom, Shalom.